Welcome to the Marshall Pruett Podcast, presented by Cooper Tires and supported by our friends at PNC Bank. Speaking of friends, we have our man, Robin Miller, my Racer Magazine and Racer.com friend, co-conspirator, and fellow IndyCar reporter, in for a little thing we do. It's been about once a year since we kicked off the podcast. That's a little silly season conversation. More talking shop, talking about many of the things that we haven't put in print yet, and might not, because whether they are things that we considered didn't quite fit the story, whatever it is that we might have written on the theme of silly season, or breaking some of the news about deals that have happened, things that are in the works and may come together, you end up with a lot of things that are supporting in some way, little pieces, little facts. They don't necessarily get into the story, so we said, you know what, we still talk about them every day in some capacity, so why not just hit the record button on that conversation, talk about some of the things that we haven't put in print on Racer, also talk about some of the things that maybe weren't fully ready to be and may never be ready. Some of the rumors that we've heard, at least the ones where we don't think they're completely silly, we tend to ignore those immediately and filter those out, so at least for the things that we mention as a rumor, paddock gossip, those items will have come from people that we know and trust, sources that have a good track record at least. So, nonetheless, many of these things never see the light of day, but we've had such a busy and fun IndyCar Silly season so far, we figured, let's hit the old record button, talk about some of these things. If some of what is in this episode, some of those things come true, great. Hey, boy, we sound like we're smart. And if some of them don't or turn out to be flat wrong, well, we already get called idiots on a fairly regular basis, so there's nothing new there. As I mentioned at the outset, we've been really fortunate to have PNC Bank join us for almost the rest of the year, which is just a pretty amazing thing. And with all that said, we'll be right back. PNC is proud to sponsor Scott Dixon, driver of the number 9 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. Everyone tunes in on race day, but so much of the race is determined off camera during the work put in throughout the week, month, and year. From the gym to the practice track, Scott Dixon and the team take small steps every day to get closer to victory lane. Copyright 2018, the PNC Financial Services Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC. After we were done recording it last night, I thought of about 5 things that I forgot to mention that I wanted to. Robin mentioned a few things he'd forgotten. One of them was, if all of this Andretti, McLaren, Harding stuff comes together, what does that mean for Andretti's Indy Lights team? Knowing that so many of the people on the Indy Lights side have IndyCar experience, are ex-IndyCar guys, just highly proven people, men and women. What does that mean? Does that mean that to staff an extra McLaren car or two, or an extra Andretti junior car team or two, does that mean they pull from the Indy Lights program to staff that? High quality, well-known, proven folks. They're definitely a prized commodity in IndyCar, almost becoming a bit of a rarity. So where do those people come from? That's one of the things that I and we forgot to get into. So another quick note here. Robin and I are adults, and we do our best to use the finest version of English, but if your rabbi, your priest, your imam, whomever, if they might be sensitive to your hearing certain words that are less than savory or maybe more adult, just a warning up front that if your ears are sensitive, rather than going and bleep out a couple of the curse words that popped in here, it's just an honest conversation between me and Robin, other than we actually made an effort to not throw in any salty language. So there's a little bit in here, not much, just letting you know ahead of time that if you really are averse to these things, you have been duly warned to hit the old stop or pause button right now. Other than that, you can get every episode of our podcast on iTunes, on Podbean, on Spotify, and also on Facebook with the Marshall Pruett Podcast page. You might have heard me mention a couple times so far over the last week that I have a MarshallPruettPodcast.com site that should hopefully be in development and done in about a couple months. So with all that said, let's get going with our silly season fun. Robin Miller, it is 9:43 p.m. on a Tuesday night in Indianapolis, 6:43 p.m. in California. What are we doing? We're talking IndyCar Silly season because we're nerds or idiots or should just find better uses for our time. Something like that. But we're here.
All the above.
You've spent the day talking to everybody imaginable. I've kind of sort of done the same thing with sports cars thrown in. You've burned down your phone's battery, which you said is a first, and it's now charged up to 31%. So we'll see how far we get. You and I were speaking.
Hey, we should say in all seriousness, today's the kind of day that makes us happy we got our job because it's so much fun. A quick story. Tony Kanaan called me last night and said, Miller, what's Alonso going to announce tomorrow? I said, what are you smoking? I don't know. What do you mean, what's he going to announce tomorrow? He goes, he put something on Twitter, 54321, 814 or 8. Yeah, I went, I don't know. I'm not on Twitter. I said, I can't imagine it being that big a deal. Guess what? It's a pretty damn big deal. But what makes today fun is you and I talked several times, emailed, traded numbers, traded notes. We used some of your good quotes from Mid-Ohio with Michael Andretti, and you're the one that wrote the story about Dixon, first and foremost, to start this whole thing off. But today's the day that that makes this job fun because it's so much fun learning things. You can't write everything you know, but just talking to people and tracking down a story. Because if Fred comes over here, which I think he's going to, it is going to be the biggest story we've had in 25 years, and it's going to put people in the seat. Television ratings, I think NBC's timing's pretty good. International media, national media, and he's just a delight.
So you're telling me that listening to Bruce Martin talk about brisket isn't the number one thing we enjoy most about our jobs? I find that hard to believe.
Besides that.
Okay. Let's start from an alphabetic standpoint, Robin, because I think we can blow through the first one pretty quickly and get into the real fun that you just mentioned. Anthony Joseph Foyt Racing, under the A.J. Foyt Enterprises banner with Matthias Leist and Tony Kanaan. Are we expecting any changes there for 2019? Or does the double Brazilian duo expected to continue?
I think they'll be right. I think they'll both be back. I think ABC Supply, like AJ, I think they really like the Indy 500, which Tony was obviously one of the three fastest cars before he got a flat tire. And he was fast in Texas. He'll be fast in Pocono this week. AJ doesn't care about anything but the Indy 500. And ABC seems to be pretty happy. Matthias is a great kid. He's just, he's 19 years old.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he's had some learning curve pain, but he's fast and he's a great kid, and I think they're happy with him too.
Completely agree. Matthias strikes me as someone who, in year 2, will make serious strides using all that he learned in year 1. We see some kids who come in and they are really impressive. Edie Jones last year, for example, didn't look like a rookie, honestly. And if anything, he might have regressed a little bit this year. Matthias looks to me more like a traditional rookie, making more mistakes and hopefully learning from them so he can come back next year and be a fairly serious young driver to keep an eye on. So Andretti Autosport, have you heard any rumors about them, Robin, and anything they might be doing, or should we move on to Carlin Racing? What do you think?
Yeah, let's see, Andretti Autosport. It's funny, Ryan Hunter Ray's quote in our story on Racer, basically he said, I'm not sure what's going on with McLaren and Andretti. There's a lot of speculation out there, and he drives for him. So I just think for sure, and by the way, thanks to Zach Brown for giving Racer.com the only quote of the day on their situation, which was a nice payback for 2017 when we had the Alonso coming to Indy story Friday at Long Beach and held it because he and Mark Miles and Honda requested us to hold it, and we did. And unfortunately, we got burned on Tuesday by Matt the Fat Bishop, and he got fired. So good riddance. I hope he's working at a car wash in England. And Zach Brown, I mean, I give him, he said, hey, I haven't given anybody a quote all day, and you guys treated us right, and happy to supply one. So
Well,
Good on Zach Brown.
Well, again, bad judgment on his part, but it was kind of him to take pity on us. So here's what I have written down, and this might guide us towards a couple things. And we're probably going to spend a fair amount of time here of all the various teams we're going to get into. I have on my little Post-it note, I have Andretti Autosport written. I have Andretti-Harding written. And I have Andretti-McLaren written. I have RHR plus Alonso written down, and I also have Harding Building ? Written down. Where do you want to start, brother? Let me start with a little something, and maybe that will lead us through this weaving thing that we probably know half of, and I'm sure when we see Michael Andretti or J.F. Thorman or Rob Edwards, they're just going to point and laugh and say, you morons, you don't even know what you're talking about. The first whiff of anything that I got related to McLaren and Andretti was in May, and it was early in May, right? I think in and around the Indy Grand Prix, and it was actually involving something that I later figured out was related to McLaren. I didn't quite know at the time, but I'd heard Andretti was searching around town for a possible building to use or buy or something for expansion. And I didn't know what for, but just heard that they were searching around, and the one team name that came back was Harding Racing. And the Harding Racing team, and also Harding's entire business, is located in that facility in Speedway, the former Sarah Fisher Hartman Racing building, which is owned by Wink Hartman. And so the first inkling I got of all this, Robin, was on the Andretti side that they were looking around for something to possibly buy or rent, or I don't know, but we want to expand and what could be available, and that came up as an option. And it wasn't just a portion of the building, but take over the whole thing. And that was right around when I was first starting to hear about, the Harding Racing team just a couple of months into their first season already experiencing financial difficulties. And we would piece a few more things together soon after that, Robin, and realize that, it wasn't just Michael looking around for additional space to plop a couple cars in, some old champ cars or whatever else he might have. It turned out that it was looking around for a place where they might house the proposed Andretti/McLaren program. And then more recently, we've gotten wind of the Andretti Junior team they're looking at putting together with Harding Racing in some capacity. Interesting, brother, that between the Andretti-Harding-McLaren thing, the most recent thing we've heard as of today is that building could just become the Andretti-McLaren base in North America, period, and a variety of things could be run out of it. So where do you want to go from there on this topic?
Well, I remember telling you that at flying to the charter plane going to Barber, a couple of Andretti guys said, "Hey, we hear we might be hiring Scott Dixon." I said, "Really?" And I just remember thinking, Scott Dixon's going to go to Andretti. I don't know. That didn't make and then when you wrote the story about Dixon and McLaren in June, then that obviously makes sense. But when I talked to Jim Campbell today, and he said, "Look, we talked to Zach." Well, I was backtrack because of McLaren throwing down on Honda. Honda Japan is not going to give them money or maybe even engines, I think, if McLaren has anything to do with it. So they basically are forced to go get a Chevy. And obviously Harding's a Chevy. And I think that, I called Chip today and I said, "Hey, when Alonso will be on your list?" And he said, "Well, I hear McLaren and Honda aren't very compatible anymore, so I don't think I think that would scratch us right away." So Jim Campbell said basically in our story, "Hey, they talked to us. I don't have any decisions or any announcements to make. It'd be great to have him in IndyCar. I don't care which engine he runs. It'd be great for the series." Which isn't, that's a very practical way to look at it. You being close to mechanical stuff and things like that, I think Honda would probably not be over the moon to have Andretti have an engine in each camp, but I think Honda's pretty smart that they understand they look like pretty cool, good guys if they said, hey, it's Fernando Alonso. He's going to raise this series to new heights. Not since Mansell was here in '93, so maybe we'll be good guys and let them do it.
And that's another thing that we've been talking about as, hey, this thing's really happening and it's going quickly a couple of months ago with McLaren and Andretti to, hey, so they're pumping the brakes a bit. And the old thing that they always told us, Zach always told us, we need to get our Formula One stuff in order before we really throw down on trying to do an IndyCar program. Seems like wow, it's happening fast. Oh, slow down. Seems like the slowdown came from some internal reminders of, hey, wait a minute. We're not even close with our F1 program. We don't want to be seen as being distracted now trying to add IndyCar while we've yet to get our full act together in F1. And then we have, just within the past week or so, heard some really interesting things we haven't necessarily written about, that McLaren is indeed on the prowl still. So I don't want to say they've taken their foot off the brake, Robin, but it seems like maybe they're easing up pressure a little bit, and maybe it's regaining some momentum. We've heard...
I don't think there's any doubt about it. I don't think there's any doubt about it.
So the thing we've heard, which now includes Fernando's announcement that he is done with Formula One at the end of the season, you and I have heard some really interesting things about drivers McLaren may or may not have pursued recently. I can't say exactly, when I say recently, it's because I don't know the exact time frame. I've heard, again, recent, but whether that is in the last 2 weeks or the last 2 months, I can't say. But I have heard, and I know that you have heard as well, Robin, that there was inquiries about could they buy out Alexander Rossi's contract. True or false? Can't say. Just heard it. Have heard the same about Robert Wickens, and was told that they were shut down on that. And then the most recent one, again, heard, haven't had a chance to confirm or deny, is they went after Sebastian Bourdais, the French fry to my hamburger. And Seb, being locked into a contract with Dale Coyne, simply not available. You take all those things, Robin, going after some fairly high-profile, high-powered guys. You take Dixon deciding to stay with Ganassi, only on a one-year deal, though, right? It's only 1 year plus.
Right.
What we've heard is a one-year deal with a one-year driver option to stay. So I know it was presented as a multi-year deal, so technically that would be correct. But at least from what we understand, it might just be one solid year with Dixie's option to stay if he wanted to. Now we've got Fernando, quote, retiring from F1 at the end of the year. Could he be in the game next year in IndyCar with McLaren and Andretti? And what do you think about Dixon saying, all right, nope, not for 2019, but is he leaving the door open possibly for 2020?
No doubt about it. Okay, I spent 3 hours in the State Fair Sunday night, and I can't tell you everything he said, but he was very, very serious. He had very, very serious talk, despite what Chip Ganassi said on that bullshit press conference yesterday. Scott Dixon had very serious talks with McLaren. He really liked the idea that a New Zealander could drive a McLaren car, and they made him an amazing offer, and he just didn't feel like they couldn't answer everything he needed to know about, are we really going to do this? So I think, okay, I'll stay with Chip for another year, and we'll see what McLaren looks like in 2020. And Scott not only is a smart racer, he's a smart person. I think that was, I think he made a practical decision. But they definitely went after him, and he definitely considered it long and hard. And you and I both know a lot of guys at Ganassi were nervous wrecks that if they lost him
for months.
Holy cow,
Months.
What would happen to the team?
Yeah.
So, like I wrote yesterday, I mean, the best thing for IndyCar was that Scott stayed with Chip this year. Keeps the balance of power, looking pretty good, and just, it's the Penske versus Ganassi story stays alive. So I think all that's cool. It's just it'll be interesting to see who will partner with Fernando. Bourdais would be perfect. I mean, God, what could Colton Herta learn much from Sebastian? Could Colton Herta learn much from Fernando Alonso as a rookie? Oh my God, you know, it was just the possibilities on this are endless. And you know, you're on Twitter and I'm on Facebook, and the people are just, you know, and this. Zach Brown said he had to get another phone today because his phone and his text, all the phone calls and texts, his phone blew up. Literally blew up.
Well, I'm supposed to see him this weekend, so I'll try and get that new phone number. Well, we mentioned Dixon, and we're going to get to Chip Ganassi here in just a little bit because there's more to talk about than just Dixie there. But, Robin, let's stay with the Andretti scenario. So let's walk through this Andretti / McLaren or dash McLaren and Andretti dash Harding scenario, because from what we can gather, there's not only a lot of interesting things that could happen, but maybe a little bit of hedging one's bets or trying to backstop things in case one happens and the other doesn't. So a few things up front. Michael Andretti and Mike Harding are very good friends. I believe they also share the same lawyer, which makes things hopefully easier to come to whatever terms business-wise. We know that Mike Harding has been going through some tough times on the family front, personal front, questions about finances going forward and whether the race team would survive. I believe, Robin, if all of these things, we're told just this week, this Andretti Junior team thing that I wrote about Michael Andretti farming out a couple of drivers to Harding to run on Andretti's behalf is going to happen. Don't know exactly who. Think Colton Herta might be one of them, but don't know exactly who. But this concept of Andretti Autosport looking for a place to possibly move one or two drivers from its full-time roster over to Harding in order to, or I should say under Harding's care, in order to free up space to run two McLaren cars.
It ain't going to be Harding's employees. It's going to be Andretti employees, right?
Yeah. From what we understand, but the original concept, as I grasp it, was, and this is going back to the May, hey, looking for some space, and gee, could that Harding thing be had? The original concept was, which we've written about as well, McLaren, if they come in, they don't want to be just an upstart team with new employees that all have to learn how to work with one another. It's going to take a year or two for everyone to gel. If it's going to happen, we would really want it to be a proper, fully running, fully gelled Andretti program. And to do that, you would essentially need to move one or two, depending on how many entries McLaren would have, one or two out of the way, or whether it's under the Andretti tent or the Harding tent. We would want to slot, in this case we're talking about a Fernando Alonso, maybe one other driver, into a proven existing Andretti program. What do you do with the guys who get moved aside? Well, that's where this Harding concept came in. From what you and I have heard, this was floated to Zach Veach's team, his sponsor, Group 1001, and also the possibility of moving Michael's son Marco Andretti as well. And again, just from what we've heard, not saying it's accurate, but we've heard that when this was either floated to Group 1001 or they got wind of it, they said, hell no. We aren't paying what we are rumored to be paying for 3 years to get, shipped laterally to a rookie team or whatever you think it is. We are paying to be under the full-bore Andretti Autosport tent. Whether it's accurate or not, can't say, just sharing what we've heard. And so once that happened, then you start to get into a more interesting scenario of, well, what if we still are trying to run two McLaren cars, but maybe we can't do it right under our own tent? Could we co-opt with the Harding team, effectively overlay ourselves on top of them, take that over, and use possibly their Chevy power plants to run a two-car McLaren / Andretti team? I think, and I'll get to the conclusion here, Robin, so you can weigh in whether you think we're on the right track or not, I think once the brakes started getting pumped a little bit, my suspicion is there was some sort of recognition that we put in a lot of work trying to map this out and trying to make it happen. If by chance the McLaren thing doesn't go through, well, we still like the idea of expansion. And if we've gone this far trying to make some sort of headway, possibly with Mike Harding, to use that team to run 2 extra cars, so we'd be now a 6-car team. If McLaren isn't going to be the one making use of those entries, then let's still try and do it, but with maybe some younger drivers under the Andretti Junior team banner. Now it looks like we could have both McLaren and junior drivers. I still don't know where all this ends up in terms of car counts and what Harding Racing does or doesn't look like next year. Do they exist? Or has Andretti taken over the whole thing? They're running McLaren cars, they're running Colton Herta, they're running whomever else. We've heard Zachary Clayman DeMello's name mentioned. We've heard a few others as wanting to get in to be a part of this satellite Andretti team. It's hard to stay on top of all this stuff, brother.
Well, if McLaren runs, and I think Chris Bedlam just sent me a text message, and he said, brother, Alonso ain't quitting Formula One without a plan. He goes, I think you're going to have a good time covering him next year. And I agree 100%. But it's going to have to be with a Chevy, and that leaves the option probably with Harding. And, maybe I don't know that it'll be Ed. It could be Ed. Mark was talking to Ed earlier this year. One of the stories you wrote. So Ed might be the other candidate. Penske, the quote he gave me today was, I'm not interested now. And so I sent him back. I said, that means October and November are open. He said, I'm not going to talk about my drivers until the season are open. So, obviously, Alonso and Penske would be a pretty dynamic combination also. But I think that Zach and Michael have become really good friends, and they trust each other, and that Zach appreciated what Michael did for him and Fernando in 2017, and I think it's going to happen.
Well, there's probably a few other things I'm forgetting about here to get into, but I've heard that the quote McLaren team could be Hunter Ray and Alonso. So, effectively it would be called a 2-car team from McLaren, but it would be using one existing entry from from McLaren. Don't know if that's true or not. Have just heard that could be a thing. Would that then allow the one extra car to be young Herta? Who knows? Interesting times because depending on what all happens here in the coming weeks and or months. Oh, and Michael Andretti as well has said he is placing a personal clock on when all this stuff needs to be wrapped up, and it's coming up in about a week or so, I believe. So he wants to know for sure, and if any or all of this stuff happens, McLaren or just the junior team with Harding, still looks like IndyCar is going to end up growing by 1 or 2 entries.
Well, and it's just going to be such an exciting. It's going to be so exciting to see the attention that he generates and the passion. And I was talking to Nigel Roebuck today, and he said, that quote he used in our story. He said he talked to Alonso in Canada after Monza, and Alonso said, "Do you believe I could have been an Indian instead of that crap when we ran through at Monza?"
Monaco.
And he's like, he goes, and then he said he went to his hotel room to go watch a real race, the Indy 500. So I think the guy's coming. I think he's made his commitment. I think Michael knows by now, and I think today's news cemented it.
PNC is proud to sponsor Scott Dixon, driver of the number 9 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. Scott knows that the road to victory lane starts today. Copyright 2018, the PNC Financial Services Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC. So Carlin Racing is up next. I haven't heard about any changes, knowing that Max Chilton's father is the primary financial benefactor behind the team. I would have a hard time seeing changes there, but who knows? It's just a case of needing to catch up with Max to make sure he's still motivated to continue. Obviously, his father, I believe, has or will by the end of the year step down as the CEO of Gallagher, which is the primary sponsor on Max's car. So that's a question to be answered. Charlie Kimball I believe, is all in there as well. So it's something we will chase down, but I don't foresee any changes at Carlin, but who knows. And then we get to Chip Ganassi Racing. So we have Scott Dixon in place, and as you mentioned, Robin, you spent a good amount of time with Dix on Sunday night. I know you can't go into everything, but give us some more insights on why you think he chose to stay with Chip, and whether, no matter what happens with McLaren, whether he might decide that, I am going to keep sticking around because we are a really powerful duo.
He got paid what he was worth finally, because Ganassi was a nervous wreck. Him and Chris Simmons are a good pair. He's got great pit stops.
Go into the nervous wreck bit a little bit, because you mentioned some of the fun stuff mentioned during the teleconference yesterday, which maybe conflicted what Chip's account was of things from what you heard.
I asked Chip, I said, was there ever a point where you were nervous you were going to lose Dixon? He says, no, only when I read the crap you wrote, and that was just noise. I don't know where you come up with it. Really, it was just noise. But again, then I don't come back and say, well, that's not what Scott Dixon told me, but I'm not going to do that. And Scott was really good on the press conference, because near the end of it, he kind of went along, he kind of said, well, I think the media made a lot of it because a lot of different people were talking. Maybe it was a bigger deal than people thought. But then Scott said, but it was a pretty serious, there was one real serious offer out there. So, he was honest about that. Everybody's got to play the game. And if I ever write a racing book, the title's going to be Liars I Have Known. And the first 15 chapters are going to be goddamn car owners. Okay? So, I'm just saying that I think Scott's got a heart, too. And I think he knows, I think he'd heard the same things we had, that, my God, if he wasn't there, what would happen to the team? And he's been there for almost 20 years, and he doesn't want people to lose their jobs. And I think a lot of things factored into it, and the fact that there was still some uncertainty with McLaren until today, and he made a pretty pragmatic decision for a year for his career, and then then I think he'll look over the McLaren situation for 2020 and see if he wants to stay with Chip or try something different.
Let me throw this at you, because Dix mentioned this on the podcast we captured yesterday, just going a little bit deeper into the reasoning behind his choice to stay, some of the interest that was shown, etc. He did mention a rather cryptic thing about the future with Ganassi. Curious what you think this might be. He said the team has some exciting things coming. I'm not sure on timelines, and mostly it's just personnel. That's not been my decision. It's something they've known for a while that they feel like they can improve on. And it's not just an IndyCar. It's across the board with the Cup side and with the GTs. Does that sound more like management level or manufacturer? I mean, what do you think he's talking about here?
No, I think he told you when you're quote you about more personnel. I just think internal stuff. And he didn't go. He just told me at the Peterson night, because we've got some pretty exciting things coming down the pipe. But did he know about Fernando being released? And because obviously Fernando, it's a Honda team, so that's not going to. I don't think it was that. I don't know if it was who his teammate's going to be next year, or I don't know. He just, for him to say it, but he told you it wasn't just, it was the NASCAR team and it was the GT team, so it's not just the IndyCar team.
Yeah,
he did a lot of exciting things. So
yeah, we'll be.
Now we got to figure out, after you talked to him and did your story yesterday, if I'm full Ed Jones, I'm probably looking for a ride right now, aren't you?
Yeah, Chip wasn't mean by any sense of the imagination when I spoke with him, but I was reading back through his quotes, and I can tell you that if I were a driver in his IndyCar team and I was in the 10 car, I would probably not be feeling super confident about my long-term health there. I'd be lying if I said we didn't have a pretty strong feeling for who will be in the 10 car going or after 2018. Do we think seriously, though, that Ed's gone at the end of the year? And if so, do we think that he lands somewhere else?
Nope. I think he's gone, and I'm not sure unless he comes up with some money. He's a good little driver, he's a good kid, but when you're on that team and you're trying to help your teammate win the championship and send off the people, and you've only had really, 3 good races? I mean, I'm sorry. You get an opportunity like that, you've got to deliver, and it's just, that's the way life is in racing. I think, as far as who would be next to Dixon next year, I mean, they loved Felix Rosenquist when they tested him, and when he won his Indy Lights races with never seeing the track, and everybody was just blown away by how good the kid was. And now he's been in Formula E, and you talked to Stefan, Johansson, his agent, and I've talked to Stefan, and he's kind of non-committal, but I think that's who they want. And I think for him to learn next to Scott Dixon, what a combination that would be.
I think that would be amazing. And I think if we wind the clock back a little bit to 2017, and this, again, we're not trying to be negative towards Ed, we're just telling the truth. Ed wasn't their first choice, or their second choice, or their third choice, and that's a reality. The interest that Chip Ganassi Racing had when they knew that they were going to downsize from 4 cars to 2, they had an interest in signing Sebastian Bourdais. And conversations were held. What we spoke about earlier with Seb seemingly locked into a lifetime contract with Dale, wasn't able to do anything there. There was interest in Felix Rosenquist. Similar thing with him locked into Formula E. There was also, after those two, the conversation moved to Brendan Hartley, which Racer broke, and we did confirm, even though there were some folks that thought it was made up, there was a contract in place for him to become Scott Dixon's teammate and all Kiwi lineup at Chip Ganassi Racing, and then the Toro Rosso team came calling, and it sounds like you just got abducted by aliens, and then that contract was basically torn up, and they got paid, and off he went. And the next step, the fourth option, was Ed Jones. And we'd hoped that Ed would do all kinds of amazing things this year. I'd even say Robin is almost an unfair, somewhat unfair level of expectations. I mean, it reminds me a little bit back in the day of when Bruno Junqueira and Nick Manassian came in. Bruno obviously performed, but Manassian just looked a little bit out of his depth. And Chip's not the type to say, yeah, I'll give you a couple years, let you figure it out. You're expected to perform right away. And I don't know if it was realistic to think a sophomore driver was going to do that. But, we look at a guy like Rossi who's come in, or Wickens. They brought a lot of experience when they came into IndyCar. Ed, just 2 years ago, was still in Indy Lights. So the fact that he hasn't been a revelation and he hasn't been a wingman for Dixie, it's not a surprise. I just also don't think it's a big conviction of him as being a lesser talented driver. I think give him a couple years and the kid can probably be a pretty serious top 5 guy wherever he goes. I just know that with what Ganassi wants and what I believe Dixon wants, they're looking for something stronger right away. So that leads me to believe, like you, that there is a imminent change coming in the number 10 car. Let's see. So,
all right. We got 26. We got 26% left. We got to talk faster.
Well, we will, and we've gotten through the majority of stuff to talk about, so that's pretty awesome.
No, I'm just messing with it.
Dale Coyne Racing, again, fairly confident Sebastian's going to be 90 years old, still driving for Dale. I don't honestly know who's going to be in the second car next year. We've spoken with Pietro Fittipaldi, who says he would like to be full-time. Didn't necessarily tie himself to Coyne on that, but said he would not mind doing that at all, and he's really enjoyed working with Sebastian. The team really loves that kid, and I know they would love to have him back. We spoke with Santino Ferrucci, Robin, little fire starter at Mid-Ohio. I don't think we're done seeing Santino in a Coyne car this year. And I don't know if it's in the 19 that Pietro is driving or if it's a third car, but sneaking suspicion he might be back for more. And I don't know if that's a precursor for him doing full season next year with Coyne or someone else, but a couple of folks to think about. Clayman DeMello was also with the team this year. I don't know if they're considering having him back or if he wants to be back there, but I think one out of the two we know. The other one probably going to be a fairly normal Dale Coyne thing, right, where we get into the off-season and have to wait to find out who's going to be in the hot rod there. Ed Carpenter Racing. You and I have heard similar things, right, Robin, that Ed's been toying with the idea of going to 2 full-time cars and then moving over to a part-time oval hot rod for himself. Have you heard any more from good old Special Ed on that?
No, but hopefully I'm going to get to talk to him about that this weekend. It's just that, I think Spencer's done a good enough job that he's shown him, look, I can put things together, and I was talking to him Sunday night at the fair, and I think, I think his confidence is so much better than it was 4 months ago, and I think he understands, hey, I got to deliver, I understand that, but he's had some, he's had some good races in the last month, fixed quick at Indy, and I really admire Ed for giving him a chance and sticking with him, because to your point, Ed Jones in 3 or 4 years of experience, that's what you used to get. Johnny Rutherford got 10 years before he won his first race in 65 and the next race in 74. Can you imagine somebody gets 10 years in an IndyCar now? No chance it would ever happen.
No.
So it's just that Ed's still as good as anybody at Indy, and he's fast at Texas, he'll be fast at Pocono. So I'd love to see him do something like that. That'd be cool if he could, especially if he could get a good sponsor. I tell you what, I was impressed with DeMello, and so was Pancho Carter at Indy and on the oval. That kid's turned in some strong races, and I think he's got some talent, and I think Little Fittipaldi's got some talent. So it's, there's a lot. It's just such a nice, deep field of kids and veterans, and that, we haven't always been able to say that.
Skipped over Brian Reinbold Racing. I know that Sage Karam is hoping to get out in a car for at least one race with them this year. His dad's been active on social media trying to find sponsors, which is a pretty interesting look that if it works for them, then I guess who am I to judge? Harding Racing. I know we've already spoken about Harding a lot from the Andretti angle. What do you think's going on here, Robin? Gabby Chavez parked, but they've all said he has a contract through 2019. Connor Daly, I think, has been really impressive in a car that, is probably bottom of the totem pole in terms of engineering and R&D, overall knowledge being brought into each round as they try and learn. Do you think we see Harding Racing return next year as just what they are now, with at least one entry and someone in a car that they own outright? Or do you think Gabby and Connor and whomever else might kind of get pushed aside as Harding gets swallowed up by Andretti?
Well, I worry about him because I think Gabby's a good race driver. That he's never had a teammate. He's never had a veteran teammate. But the good thing about Connor is, it's like Derek Daly said for years, Connor is a really good technical driver, and even A.J. Foyt said that, and Don Halliday, and the guys that have worked with Connor, he's a really good technical race driver. And Brian Barnhart said, my God, we learned so much in 2 races with Connor. I mean, and not a knock against Gabby. Barnhart said, I'm not knocking Gabby at all. It's just that he was by himself. He was a rookie, pretty much. Connor's driven enough races and been in Europe, and he's got some chassis savvy that we've never had before, and we've learned a lot. So that's why I'm glad, according to your story yesterday or today, that he's going to get to run Pocono. Because it's like, okay, we're making some progress here. Let's don't just stop. And I know DeMello's got money, and they need money, so he's going to get to run, which you also wrote. So it's just, that's a really good question. I don't think they can answer it. I think they got to wait to make sure he stays married. Not Connor, Mike Hardy. He can stay married, and he can find a sponsor, and he can, and Andretti and Chevrolet help him out, and maybe, hopefully, keep the doors open.
Yeah, I would hate it if both Connor and Gabby were collateral damage in growth plans. Wouldn't be the first or the last time, but you and I, we don't hide the fact that we're fond of both of those kids. They both drive the wheels off of whatever they're in, and I'm not saying there are other drivers in the series that shouldn't be in it, and Gabby and Connor deserve more. I'm not a big deserve guy. I mean, the world is what it is, and if you got to drive in the Indy 500 multiple times and can't, you're still many laps up on most of us in life, but you would like to see the two of them continue. Juncos Racing, I'll raise my hand and say I have no clue as to what they might do next year. When it comes to IndyCar, I can mention this, and we're, again, recording this Tuesday evening, so I probably won't put this up until Wednesday morning, but by the time you're listening to this, you will have read a little rumorish piece that I know is true, but that Ricardo Juncos and Juncos Racing will be expanding into IMSA next year with one Cadillac DPI prototype. And where I think that is important is there's a lot of people that have an interest in doing sports car racing in South America. I think, Robin, and I don't know who the drivers will be for Ricardo's DPI program, but I think this could end up being just as strong, if not a stronger pipeline to get folks into IndyCar than maybe even his Mazda Road to Indy team is right now. So I think that's going to be a really good thing. Doesn't answer who's going to be driving the number 32 Chevy from Juncos Racing next year, but I think with where he's going and expanding into IMSA, I think the pool of funding and talent should end up opening up more than what it is right now. Michael Shank, our boy, with Jim Meyer now, so they have Meyer Shank Racing. We know that they are planning to expand from 6 races to 10 with Jack Harvey. They are intending to buy a second car, which is great news. Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan, this is another interesting one, and I'll start off by asking you and add in a little bit of something that will hopefully be up by the time this gets posted. But we've heard Bob tell us, Robin, that he wants to expand to 3 cars next year. We thought it was going to be Little Herta. We've heard there could have been some roadblocks there you can tell us about, but we also know that Sato is on a 1-year deal, and we don't know if he is going to return. So what do you think's going on in the good old house of Bob and Graham?
Well, obviously, I think Brian Herta and Bob had a good relationship. When Brian drove for him, and I think he's paid a lot of attention to Colton and realizes, holy cow, 18 years old, this kid's going to be a star. I think the assumption from everybody was that George Michael Steinbrenner's dad was going to write a check for $5 million, and Colton was going to be in a car, and George Michael told you and I both, we're looking for sponsorship, but my dad's not going to write a big check. We got to go out and find it on our own, which is very admirable. I like that. But I think he said they're working. They got people trying to help them find money. And you just hope the Steinbrenner name. They've got to know so many biggies in New York City that somebody would say, "Yeah, $5-6 million, sure." When you need it. I mean, hopefully that's going to work out because that kid wants to be around for a long time, along with Colton, and he's exactly what IndyCar needs.
So we don't think, could be wrong, but we don't think what we anticipated being Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan Steinbrenner Racing. We think that might end up being more the Andretti Jr. team where Colton and George Steinbrenner, the 27th, turns up. But again, we will have to see. We've not sure if Takuma will be back, but I think he will. I think that's still a good overall thing for the team. What I don't know is if they keep Takuma, who they would still be pursuing for a third entry if it isn't Colton. So I think that's another thing. While you're in Pocono, we're going to put you to work, damn it, and go find out.
Your boy Pato O'Rourke's going to be somewhere because he's going to probably win $1 million, and he's a badass too.
Yeah, that kid, I'm telling you, he is. I can't wait for him to get into IndyCar. People are going to love him or hate him. He's going to be like Montoya that way.
Well, his performance in the rain at Barber convinced me. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" I mean, he was just phenomenal. I mean, he was just car control and sliding around and getting faster every lap, and man, just Jackie Hicks. I mean, he was amazing in the rain. and he's been amazing on ovals, and he's been, I think him and Colton, like your story the other day, I mean, there's 5 really good drivers, but of the 5, there are 2 that are just clearly, for their age, are just going to be major stars, I think.
And what I hope you're reading or have read this morning on Racer is, I did speak with Bob this morning, and he said they were getting close to running Colin Brown as a 3rd driver at Sonoma. He said it looks like time has run out to run him in a race before the end of the year, but they are going to test him in the postseason, and they are very interested in seeing what kind of speed and talent he has to offer. And Bob knows him. Keep in mind that Bob's son Graham, Colin, Hinch, and others were all karting competitors years ago. So, they've all known one another. Bob has obviously seen Colin in IMSA for many years, since Bob owns a team there and knows how good he is. So, great to hear that Bob is wanting to investigate talent outside of the traditional IndyCar circles, which he said is really an intentional effort on his part. Don't just keep trying out the same old guys, or, all right, this is some dude who finished 5th in the Formula 2 series. Let's actually look around to some other places where some hidden talent might be. And on that topic, he also mentioned that he wants to test, along with Colin, former Sauber Formula 1 driver and current Action Express Racing IMSA prototype driver and championship leader Felipe Nasr from Brazil. So, telling you, if by chance we get Nasr in the series, along with Matthias Leist, Tony Kanaan, hey, what if we add Fittipaldi in full time? We know we're going to get Elio back for the month of May. This would start to be feeling a little bit like the 90s there, early 2000s, Robin, where there was a serious and proper representation by Brazil in IndyCar.
I don't want to sound like my hero AJ Foyt. We got enough damn burners, but I want Colin Brown. I want Colin Brown in the series because he was the flavor of the year about 10 years ago in open wheel, and suddenly he just vanished. It was like, that's the guy. I don't want to see another Jonas Bomarito or John Edwards or John Fogarty or Alex Gurney. I don't want to see guys get passed over and not get a chance. And Paul Tracy's really high on Colin, and I think that would be phenomenal if he got an IndyCar ride.
Moving on, wrapping up here pretty quickly, we've got Schmidt Peterson Motorsports. We know that both Wickens and Hinch are under contract, multi-year contracts with the team. And I know that we spoke about potential McLaren interest in Wickens and that not going anywhere. We'd be safe in saying that wouldn't be the only team, Robin, that has inquired for sure. Might have even asked one of us about one of those 2 Canadians. That'd be safe to say.
Roger Penske's very interested in Wickens, and I think he's also very interested in Rossi. And I think that Honda is going to have a lot to say about it because I think Honda said, we're not sure what we're going to do. I'm just paraphrasing here. I'm just guessing, but they love Rossi, they love Wickens, and they love Scott Dixon. And I think those guys are always going to be Honda drivers. And I just think, if Roger Penske comes to Alexander Rossi or Robert Wickens and says, I want to sign you a 3-year deal, I'm going to pay you this. I mean, as loyal as you've been to Honda, and as loyal as Honda's been to you, and as well as you've run, man, I mean, how do you turn down Roger Penske? I mean, I don't know. And speaking of Roger Penske,
what? Hey, well, hold on. You're skipping one little thing here. Actually, 2 little things. I've heard rumor that Gary Peterson, who is affiliated with Schmidt this year with the 500 entry for Jay Howard, I've heard that Gary might be looking for ways to keep his name in IndyCar a little bit next year, along with the IMSA prototype program he has. And then we have Scuderia Corsa, and I had a bit of an non-update from Stefan Johansson, who we both love and is fantastic at saying a lot of words that sometimes aren't super filling, but not a huge update. Actually, it was an update saying we don't really have an update. There's been no decisions made on what we're doing, but I guess I retain that as a positive, Robin. It's better than saying, yeah, we thought about it and we're not going to go IndyCar racing next year. I've heard, we'll throw this out too. Johansson is the sporting director for that team. He's also the driver manager for Scott Dixon, Felix Rosenqvist, and Zachary Claman-DeMello, who you call Zachary Clamato.
Right.
We know that Dixon's off the board. I think I might have written it, you might have, I don't know. But if we look at what Scuderia Corsa might do next year, if they come in full-time, part-time, whatever time, the one or two of Steph's other clients could certainly be in the frame there for something. So watch this space. And now we get to the grand finale. Team Penske. And we don't want you getting any more angry phone calls from PR types saying that you've made up stuff, Miller.
Oh,
so
no.
stick to the truth.
You didn't have the balls to call me. They called Mark Lindane and I think Banner. It's like, we never talked to Scott Dixon about a ride. Bullshit. You certainly did. End of story. Move on.
So what do we think about next year, Mr. Miller? Because we know that Joseph Newgarden got a contract. We believe Will Power, new Indy 500 winner, is going to get a contract. I was told by Roger in June, hey, you going to hold on to all three? Yep, we plan on, obviously they already had Newgarden, but are you going to hold on to the current lineup? To which he said, yes, we're planning to make no changes there. That was in June when he told me that. Have you heard anything that might lead you to believe that there's been any evolution in those plans?
Yeah. Simon told a driver at Mid-Ohio that he hasn't heard much about next year, and I think he's a little concerned, which is amazing when you think that 2 years ago he was the champion. Him and Ben Bressman have a great relationship. Simon's a hell of a race driver. As he had a tough season, you had our teammates kicking his ass pretty much. Is Roger patient? More patient than most. And if you can't get Rossi or Dixon or Wickens, why would you get rid of Simon Pagenaud? Are you going to replace him? But I really think Simon. I think he's going to be okay. But then you think about Juan Montoya won Indy in 2015, and by 2017, he's gone. Elio Castanedo was in the fight for the championship last year, and he's an Indy 500 only driver. But obviously, the circumstances were they needed two big badasses for their actor program, so I kind of understand that. It's just like those guys were still pretty damn good, so there was no hesitation on RP's part when they cut down to three cars. And, Montoya was an Indy driver, and not even this year, and Elio's an Indy driver next year. But I just think, Pagenaud is a great guy, and he's a hell of a race driver, and I just can't imagine Roger giving up on him. I think a lot of people have said Pagenaud's in trouble. He's going to lose his ride. But who are you going to put in there? I mean, who's going to replace him that's better? I think he's going to be okay.
Well, certainly not Scott Dixon, because we know that they never spoke to him. But
right,
so they lost.
We just made that up. More media, more fake news from the damn media.
The immediate news done made some stuff up again. All right, well, I think we're kind of sort of done. I mean, I'm hoping Marco. We hear that Marco is re-signed by the Andretti team, and everything is normal there. I know that Brian Herta told us not too long ago he fully expects Marco to be in the number 98 Andretti Herta IndyCar come St. Petersburg, so nothing really there to talk about, at least from their perspective. Got some other guys. We'll see what happens with Jordan King. Does he stay with Ed's team, knowing that he wants to be full-time? Robin wants to do ovals. Is that the reason for Ed to hopefully expand to 2 full-time cars to keep him? Could Jordan be somebody that Bobby Rahal is looking at? Again, I don't know. Possibly. He stands out to me as someone who might be a Rahalish driver to consider. We've got other fun stuff like, could Tony Stewart be back in the Indy 500 next year? We have...
Hell no. No.
You want to cover him.
Well, I love him, but smoke is blowing smoke. He ain't been in IndyCar in 18 years. He's fat. He says, I got to have a race before Indy. Well, good luck. What are you going to run? Are you going to run Barber or Long Beach? Or 16? Ain't going to be no ovals before Indy. He's been telling me for 10 years, there's no way I'm going to show up once a year at Indy and get my ass kicked, because you will get your ass kicked by these guys. I don't want to run 15th. So what's changed his mind is something different about that now. I think I think knowing Stu, he was just kind of having fun with. I think, if Roger Penske gave him a fourth car, I think he'd try it. I really do. And I think he could run 10th or 8th or 9th maybe, but he's not going to win the race. And he said it's an insult to think that you're going to come in there and run with these guys if you don't have. But being out of a car that long, I mean, I've lost a lot of money gambling. I'd probably lose money on this too, but I just don't see it.
You know, I realize we failed to delve into whether McLaren could turn up with Bobby Rahal or Ed Carpenter.
Well, you wrote a story. They talked to Rahal.
Well, they've talked to both, but I may be mentioning the fact that we failed to talk about it because there's nothing to talk about it, at least that we know about.
Bob Rahal's a Honda, brother, and that ain't going to change, and there's no way Alonso's driving a Honda. He's going to Chevy. So that's why Ed would be another option.
And the last thing, which we don't have answers for, but we're just going to throw out because it is actually something serious. Michael Andretti has become a super team each year at Indianapolis by adding a couple of entries. Well, if we do have this McLaren expansion, and maybe even on top of that, this junior team expansion, will there be any seats available for a Carlos Munoz, Stefan Wilson, you name it, who would normally be on the radar to come in and drive a quality car at the Indy 500? Could that all be soaked up because the team is already essentially bursting at the seams with full-time entries?
Yeah,
so there's a lot of stuff, Robin, that we're not going to see how it shakes out. But, man, again, it's all interesting stuff for sure.
But as good as Carlos Munoz runs at Indy, he could go to our pal Mike Shanks and say, hey, I want to run your second car. What's it going to take? Because Carlos has a little money, I think. So, you know, Stefan is good with sponsorships. He can come up with something like that. So, I mean, we could have, God, would it be awesome if we had 40 cars at the Indy 500 next year? Then bumping would actually be real bumpy.
Factor in Danica Patrick doing another farewell tour. You get Buddy Lazier in there. You get his kid in there. I mean, we could have 45 cars.
You forgot to talk about Alexander Julian.
About who? Alfonso Chelis Jr.?
Alexander Julian.
You're talking Elton Julian. Alexander Julian was a clothier sponsor of the Newman Haas team. There, you old fart. I gotta call Elton and catch up with him. I know he was a little dismayed when IndyCar came out with their licensing guideline stuff because the kid he wants to run, Ben Hanley, would not qualify under the new guidelines. But I think if you were to go let him test for a day and had, Lion Dyke and whomever watching him, Pappas and whatnot watching him, they would be absolutely clear that this kid has crazy amounts of talent and would definitely be deserving of a license. And I may or may not have spoken about that today with Jay Fry. Yeah, but I do need to catch up with good old Elton or Alexander Julian, whatever. I'll just call it straight.
Well, you could, I'm sorry, El. But, IndyCar might have to go back to the old days and say, okay, you got to run one or two races before you get an Indy 500 license, or I don't know if that even is that. But you can be pragmatic about this and see what the guy. You don't have to be an Indy license driver to have some talent, and people know that you came from Europe. And Robert Wickens drove an Atlantic car. He never drove a light car, but he was pretty good in the DTM car, the Formula 3, and the Formula 2, and all the other things he did well in. So I know what I don't know what to think of that rule, but all right, 7% battery, 1 hour and 6 minutes for the people on the LA and the San Francisco freeways trying to drive to work. We have given our best.
Oh, this wasn't our best. We have no idea what being good is, but we hope that you enjoyed this little gab fest between MP and RM. And we do this, what, Robin? Once a year, maybe twice a year in podcast form? I don't know if we told you anything really interesting, but maybe we added in a couple things that we haven't written about because they might be a little more unsolid to not deserve the written word. But anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this little ramble fest with myself and Robin. With me at least. And you got to say mean stuff about Tony Stewart, so that always makes for a good podcast.
I got to throw down on Chip and say that smoke was blowing smoke. So we'll see.
All right, well, go.
Okay, brother.
Go do something with your life, Miller. Make something out of yourself.
It's 10:45. I'm an old man.
All right, well, thanks again to Cooper Tires and PNC Bank for supporting what we do here. And, we'll speak to you soon, I think.